Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Brazelton here with my co host, Chris Noble. We are from Wisdom from the Edge. Super excited that you're here to join us today. We are going to talk about the power of saying no. And what does that mean to say no, to actually have courage or to get out of a state of fear because you're going to miss out on something? It's a great self care practice to actually stand up for oneself and to decide what is in the best framework, what is in the best interest of ourselves. And for a lot of people, saying no is really difficult because it plagues and plays with our emotional self-worth, our mental, emotional body of, if I say no, what are people going to think about me? Um, they need help. Nobody can do it if I don't do it. I mean, I won't get that promotion. I may upset someone and I don't want to be unliked. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that happen when we have a tendency to not say no. But Chris, I would love to hear your take on the importance of saying no.
Yeah, it's so important and something I've had to work a lot on too because I was a very much a yes guy, I would just say yes to everything. And I think it really comes from a scarcity mindset when you're saying yes to everything and you're really not putting up your own boundaries, and you can be saying yes to things that you really don't want at all, but you're doing it because you're really you're scared, and you know what, that's okay. It's natural. It's also something that's conditioned. We're our last episode, just before this one, we were talking about overworking ourselves and the insane to-do lists that we have, the tasks that we take on, and it's just this idea of not saying no to things is also another example of this product of our environment right now. And one of the other interesting things is it's saying no is so powerful, and I feel like similarly to saying no is also I remember years ago I listened to a podcast that resonated with me, and it was called The Art of Quitting. And I think there's a similar stigma to saying no as there is to quitting something, because this idea, oh, there's no quitters here, only losers are quitters. There's no quitters on this team. Like, think about how many catchphrases you've heard about the complete, in not even just insulting, but just the down talking of anyone who quits anything. You're automatically a loser. You're a terrible person if you quit something. But what if that thing that you're quitting is hurting you, is taking you down a really negative path, and by quitting, you've now positively affected your life significantly? What's the same thing with saying no? When you're saying yes to everything, you could be saying yes, and it's going to be putting you on a really negative trajectory for different things because you have no discernment. And then when you start to discern things and it's been be like, you know what? No, that doesn't feel good to me. I'm not, you know what? No, 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 I'm not going to do this. And once you start to say no, and I've heard a lot of my friends comment on this as well, not like recently as well, where they'll be like, oh man, I said no to this client today and it felt amazing. Like, wow, just to be able to say, you know what? No, I'm not available then. I'm available this time. Or, you know what? No, we can't change that budget. This is the budget, end of story, or whatever the situation is. It feels actually extremely empowering to say no. And I think that's something that well, we can start exercising, right, Lisa? Is just bring it into the small areas of your life. It can be, you can start small. It doesn't have to be with your boss. It can be with a friend saying, "Hey, can we meet for coffee right now?" And you might feel that pull of obligation because maybe you haven't seen this friend for a couple of weeks. They've been wanting to see you, and you're like, "Ah, I've been trying to, you know what? Sure, I'll do it now, even though you don't really want to do it now." Just say no. Try it in the smallest little social settings just to test the waters and see how it feels. And I have a sneaky feeling you're going to start to become a little addicted to saying no.
I love that you said that. The other thing is that I think that there is an attachment to guilt, which by the way is a very, very low frequency. It is a mindset that has been taught only. We are not innate guilt driven humans. When we come in, we have to learn that particular mindset. I would almost want to say a skill set, but I was doing that out of sarcasm, because I think that a lot of times when people say no, they're being shunned. We live in a society still, I think, that this conversation around self-care is there's a whole nother side to self-care, where people are like, hey, I don't have time to self-care. I have a hardly enough time to do anything. I don't have time for it. But I think in the back of their mind, it's that people frown upon others who take the time to do something on a regular basis. And I'm not just talking about like, hey, I went and I got a massage today. When was the last time that happened? Well, it's never happened before. It happened a year ago. And people almost feel guilty for doing something that's in their best interest for themselves. And so I really want to push the envelope here and say, well, where is that guilt coming from? And by the way, is it yours? Or is it something that you've picked up, or something that you've learned through your parents or preachers or teachers or peers or media or whatever, that is making you believe that self-care practices is not a good thing to do? And no is a very, very powerful way in which to open the window, open this envelope, if you will, to a very different level of freedom. Um, you know, I mean, I think that when babies are little, what is it, like their first words typically, and if it's not like mom, mama, or dada, or whatever, it's no. I mean, babies start saying no. It's like the very first thing that they start saying. They know what they want. They know what they don't want. But as we get older, a lot of times we end up not being able to discern what's in the best interest of ourselves. So I had to learn that, because Chris, I'm very much like you. When somebody needs something from me, I'm the first one to be like, I'll do it. Give somebody who's really busy something to do and they'll get it done. That old saying. There is truth to it. But there's also a control aspect to it. So let's, like, again, we're kind of uncovering this. If we don't say no and we say yes, does that sometimes mean that we have the ability to have a good face, to show that we are maybe masking something? Maybe it is a power play. Maybe it is a control technique that will allow us to have the upper hand. But part of our podcast is how important it is to unravel the layers, right? To really understand what motivates you, right? And if you are afraid to say no, where'd that come from? Like, look at that. And there may be some things that ultimately I'm a parent and my son needs something. I'm not going to say no to him. But that's not what we're saying here. But we're saying on a regular basis, how do we say no for our best? I keep on saying self-care practices, but it really goes beyond that. Right, Chris? I mean, I think, oh, wow, there's like stuff that's coming through right now. So on one hand, because I'm surrounded by a lot of plants, and I'm hearing, well, nature doesn't say no, it just does.
I love that.
And so, and we're always trying to give examples of how amazing nature is. So on one hand, I get that. On the other hand, I think sometimes we don't have any idea how to balance our yeses and nos. So, yes, nature.
Yeah, well, nature's always my favorite remedy for everything. And it's also a great teacher. And at the same time, I've learned a lot about saying no, especially in the last couple of years, where it can also really help discern true connections. And when I say true connections, I mean connections with people that are in alignment with who you really are, the true nature of who you are. And what I mean by that is, I've had friendships in the past where I didn't say no, to whatever they would be asking of me. And then when I would start to practice, I'm like, you know what? Like, I wouldn't be saying it in a mean way. I'd just be saying no. I'd just be putting up my boundaries and be like, no, I can't do this, or "No, can't meet them, whatever." And for some of those friends, it would actually really trigger them. It would upset them. They get mad at me. And then I would realize, is that really a friendship I want? When I put up my boundaries, when I speak my truth and I actually say, you know what? No, I'm not feeling this right now. I don't really want to do that right now. With the friendships that don't receive that well, that's actually a really great way to discern that connection is actually not really meant for me anyway. So it's also, in a sense, when you say no, it can also start to filter out different people in your life. And it might be scary at first because, we get freaked out when conflict happens like that. But at the same time, it's ultimately in the long term really helpful because you want people in your life that are going to celebrate you saying no and being like, no, I don't feel like that. Oh, awesome, man. Yeah, great. Cool. It doesn't work for you. That's fine. We'll just do it another time. Great. And when it's easy and flowy like that, that's a more of a connection that you probably want to keep going with, right?
Yeah, I love that you said that. But the other thing that I want to bring up is that sometimes we don't have the opportunity to say no. We don't have that necessarily that option just because of the circumstance. And yet, you brought up a very great point, and that is, how do we hold healthy boundaries for ourselves? So, you know, there are people who are listening here that have jobs. Maybe you're a school teacher and you've got, kids that you are guiding. Perhaps you have aging parents. You also may have your own children. There are so many different scenarios here that push the boundaries of our own healthy guidelines. And yet, can we still honor ourselves and give ourselves what we need to stay sovereign or to get into a sovereign space, which I consider to be freedom, at the same time, excuse me, honoring the responsibilities and the people around us. I had a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago who is going through some very difficult challenges with parents who are aging. One of them is pretty full on Alzheimer's, and that is a disease that rips families apart. And there needs to be the caretaker, which is often a child, an adult child, that is going in to try to care for their parents. And I have had lots of conversations with people, and in particular, this woman, I asked her, I said, what are your self care practices? And she looked at me like, I don't have them. I don't have time to have them. And I said, well, you're going to follow your parents in their transition out of their physical body if you do not set some boundaries for yourself so that you can um, take care of them, but take care of yourself first. It's the same thing. It's like going on an airplane. They say the same thing over and over again. You use the mask, you put the mask on yourself, and then you put the mask on to the child next to you, which is your child typically, right? And the first thing that parents want to do is put it on their child before they put it on themselves. But if we can't give to ourselves, how can we give to others?
It always comes back to that. It always comes back to the self, and we're also conditioned yet again, pretty much spending most of our life unlearning, basically deprogramming. And one of the other conditions, right, um, is being selfish is a bad thing, right? If I put that oxygen mask on first, I'm being selfish because I'm not protecting my child. No, you're actually doing more for your child by putting yourself first, because you're going to always, when you put yourself first, always, you're always going to be able to come at the situation as your best self, and therefore you're going to honor the people that you care about the most by putting yourself first. If you care about those people, you'll actually, that's, if anything, the motivation to get into self work and to have yourself healing practices, these things that just, again, these self-care things that are essential, are absolutely essential to everyday life. When, if you switch the motivation, if you're having a hard time in the beginning doing it just for yourself, that's okay. Do it for your loved ones. Do it for your parents, your kids, grandparents, grandchildren, whatever, whoever motivates you. You're doing it for them when you're putting in that time and that intention into yourself, because you'll also be a better version of yourself when you're around them, and then that's going to positively influence those loved ones in your life in the way that you really want to have. So it might sound counterproductive, or it might sound like you're being, selfish, or you're not putting the people that you care about first when you put yourself first, but in a weird way you actually are, and you're improving that relationship because you're also not building up resentments that are subconscious usually. And when you always say yes, 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 yes to everything, after sometimes years of that building up, you might one day just explode on somebody and be like, no, I can't, and just freak out, and they're going to have no idea where that's coming from. And then that could become a very tumultuous situation because you never voiced over those years just a simple, no, I don't want to do that. And if you're talking about keeping and repairing and maintaining relationships, that's a huge way to maintain a relationship, is to be honest when you don't want to do something and just say no.
Um, I'm going to go so far as to say that even saying no to a relationship that you've been in for a long time.
Definitely.
I have been working with some clients, happen to be working with several clients who are actually going through very, uh, will may likely, more likely to actually end a marriage than to make it work. Um, and one of the themes that I have been seeing is that the one of the partners is actually putting their foot down, and they're discovering who they are in a different way and realizing that this is just not what I want to do anymore. This is not who I am. This is not what's making me feel good anymore. I don't want to be here. I don't necessarily know what I want exactly, but I know what I don't want. And by the way, that's also saying no. You're saying no to a relationship. And I am a big believer of, hey, when your time is up with someone, your time is up. We've been conditioned as humans to believe that we should be in some kind of long term marriage that, quite frankly, doesn't really exist right now. And there's nothing wrong with it if you have reached the end of the time in which two people have come together. If you can learn how to uncouple in a very conscious and thoughtful and harmonious way, you're a living example for your kids. And that's the other thing. When we stand up for ourselves, we're actually showing people around us that it's okay to do that too. And I absolutely, we want our kids to be able to say no, right? Say no to drugs, say no to wrong people that shouldn't be, that are maybe negatively influencing our kids. So we want our children to have a voice and stand up for themselves, and yet there's a lot of mixed messaging going on where they can say no, or we're teaching them to say no, but then they can't say no to other things. And it's very, very confusing. So
It's very
yeah,
conditioned.
yeah, it's a condition, but without clear parameters. And so, this episode is not it's not to promote saying no to everything. It is to go within and find out what is it in your life that doesn't work for you. And maybe not so much of a reaction to a situation, but maybe it's much bigger. And ask yourself, where are you playing in this perpetual thing that doesn't feel good? And it could be a career. It could be like, I've been doing this thing that I don't like, but I'm doing it because I need money. Well, oftentimes when we release and let go, we are able to then open up the door for something greater to happen. And we don't realize that. So, just trust that there is power in you creating healthy boundaries of what may be different for you in your life that wasn't 10 years ago, as an example. What other ways, Chris, can we give our audience some healthy ways to say no? Examples, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's like dipping your toes in and just starting to test out how it feels to put up these boundaries and say no. And you can really start to test it in, let's say, your work, right? Let's say you have a boss or a manager who says, Chris, I need this by this time. And and I'm not saying do this all the time, but when you're given, let's say, a task, and you're like, I'm not going to be able to get that done. Like, I just have too many things. To say that and be like, right now my task list is too heavy. I won't be able to deliver that at this time. I can at this time though, and you give like this something that feels better in your body when you say it, and you use that intuition, which we talked about on many episodes. It's your body. There's that part somewhere in your body that you're gonna feel like when you can't do something. Voice that and just say like, you know what? No, I can't. But I can do this, but I can't right now. For whatever it is, and you just test that out and see how that goes and see how you feel regardless of how that other person receives it. How do you feel when you say that and when you say no? And it can become something that when you tune into when you say no, again, on the most basic things, it could be anything. It can be a friend asking, hey, can you pick me up for us to go out to the thing today? I'll be like, no, I can't. But I'll meet you there, for whatever reasons, whatever that is. Most of the time I can, but sometimes I can't. And I got to say it when I can't. No, I'm not going to because of A, B, C, and D. And you just test these little things out, see how you feel, because it's the feeling of saying no, the feeling of putting up your own boundaries, which is also a feeling of self-love. When you do that, it kind of becomes addictive. And maybe not addictive is the right word, but it feels good to protect yourself. It feels good to stand up for yourself. And so when you say no, and even just these little tiny microcosms throughout your day, try it out. The grocery store, whatever the situation is, try saying no in a conscious way, and then see how you feel afterwards. And let us know in the comments what you've experienced.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to say something so simple like somebody may suggest a place to eat. Yeah, you want to go have pizza tonight. And, maybe you don't really feel like it. And so instead of saying, sure, whatever you want, be like, no, I'm not really in the mood for that. That's really a really interesting way to exercise. I'm also going to go so far as to say, we don't always have to say it verbally. There could be things in our life that we decide, I'm not going to do this anymore, or I'm not going to, I'm going to release this habit. Maybe it's smoking. Maybe you say no to that. Maybe instead of being exhausted and then you want to relax for the day and say, I'm going to have another drink. Maybe you say no to that. Maybe you decide, at the grocery store, you can get an extra salad or you can get a chocolate bar. Now, That's up to you. I'm not telling you what to do. Maybe the chocolate bar is the best thing you can do, but you never give yourself the opportunity to do that. Maybe that's a yes. And the salad that you always have because you're so concerned about how you look on the outside can actually take a back seat. Right? So there's so many different ways that we can use this in a very minute way.
It's
And
so
it can
powerful.
grow. Yeah.
And it's just something where you'll look back years later and go, wow, thank God that I've, made that switch to just speak up for myself a bit more. And it grows in increments and you don't really notice it. But when you look back, you can really notice a massive shift. And I know that I can guarantee the people watching and listening, you're going to feel very grateful that you have started to take this step in standing up for yourself. Because that's really what no means in a sense, is it's standing up for what you want or don't want in a situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, viewer, for staying here with us. If you like what we're saying, please give us thumbs up, subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you have, experiences that you'd love to share, we'd love to hear from you. So thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Wisdom from the Edge. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And make sure, if you haven't already, to follow, like, and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. It actually helps us out quite a lot in growing this platform. And also leave us a comment if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts about what you enjoyed on this episode and things that you want to offer, maybe ideas for a new episode or things that you want to hear more about. Also, make sure to check out our website, wisdomfromtheedge.org. All that is in the description below. And you can learn more about what we do, what offerings we have, and of course, the courses and programs. There's lots to learn from, a lot of really cool resources to check out to enhance your everyday life. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wisdom from the Edge.